in preparation for our dome workshop coming the next weekend or so, I just wanted to show you some specifics about using a dome, building the dome, its different materials, and the process of doing that. Here on the first slide, we have the dome now that is in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, and that's the completed dome with the plastic without the shade cover on it. And that's basically getting ready for winter so that we have a lot of thermal gain from the sun. And because it was built last summer, we didn't really need the plastic on it, but we did use the shade cloth like in the upper right. So there wasn't any plastic on it for the summer until it got cold, and we wanted to have the season extension started up. So a lot of the things that we do with the dome don't have to be done right away, just depends upon the year that you build it. And then you can see that it's used also like a trellis if it doesn't have the plastic on it. For the most part, a lot of the vine crops and other things grow up the sides of it, especially beans and squash, and any of those type of vine crops are great because they'll climb up it, leaving the land underneath or the pots underneath for other things like broccoli or shorter growing plants, peppers. Tomatoes can be tied up in it and go vertical. So that's the great thing about the dome, is going vertical with it and also having a structure of a trellis and then being able to cover it up for having season extension. The original dome in 2011 was at my farm in Minnesota with a group of high school kids. A lot of fun. And this was a smaller dome. This is a 3/8 dome, so it's not quite half a sphere, where the ones that I've been making now are 5/8, which are slightly bigger than a sphere. Give us you more taller space, more air collection, a little bit easier to work in. So this is one that I had there, and I had a garden on the outside and a very large round fence around it, 6 feet tall, to keep the deer out, and used it mainly as a trellis but never covered it up at that point. But it had a lot of great production in a small space, keyhole beds inside, and that was my first experience with that. Structurally, and this was actually the second place that it had been built, and then when I sold my farm, we took it down, disassembled it, and reassembled it back at the high school. So over the almost 8 years that I had it, it actually had one piece of pipe that was damaged that we replaced. Other than that, they are collapsible. You can take them down, put them up elsewhere, and they're actually very easy to transport. Regardless of the size of the domes, just because of the structure and the way they're made, I really like the single stress struts. So that's the strategy that I've used for the domes that I build. And that is where all the struts come to one point, one bolt, instead of some kind of little manifold or other connector with that. That puts all the stress on that one point, and when you tighten that bolt up with an impact wrench, it's very tight, and these are extremely strong and rigid structures. So they can take snow loads, wind. It's amazingly strong how they work, and then also they're very adaptable to that sense once they're rigid like that for holding up plants, plastic covers, things like that. So regardless of the size, the geodesic dome has been very popular with many people just because it is very flexible in how you use it. I use them quite small. People can build them quite large. Regardless of the size, it's just a beautiful structure to have, and that's kind of the essence of its popularity. The dome we will work on in the workshop is a semi-permanent structure intended to last for many years, and impervious to mold, rot, and condensation because we're using galvanized steel. That's the main point of I using galvanized steel, just because of the dampness within, condensation, and things like that. And wood doesn't last, and I've seen that over and over with people that have built them from wood. Also with the different sort of connectors, is that they're not as strong as the EMT pipe that we're using. It's just electrical conduit, or if we use steel pipe. You can also change the cover material based on the season, layer materials on for warmth, and also you have quite a bit of storm protection because it is a strong structure. On one of my designs in Texas, we actually planned on building a dome there. It hasn't been done yet, but that was for an artificial canopy, and that's another great purpose of the domes, is if you want to have fruit trees and you want to get them started and have them protected, you can build the dome over or put in small fruit trees inside the dome for protection. And then we use shade cloth triangles hanging down to give it mottled shade. And it's like an artificial canopy for small trees to help them get started. And then once they get to a certain size, even as they start to grow through the dome, you can take the dome apart, move it somewhere else, and use it for other trees. So it's a great way to protect small plants, especially a garden, but really also fruit trees and things like that. Get them started, and then just kind of like an egg, take it apart and move it somewhere else to start. So in dry land areas or areas where there's a lot of herbivores that are going to be grazing on them, it's a way to have protection and then also have the climate and the growing space that a lot of small fruit trees and other trees need to grow well. The dome is used for many things. In this workshop, we will focus on using the dome as a greenhouse and targeting all the strategies and materials for that purpose. Although some domes are used for housing, they are a completely different material and strategy. The goal of our garden dome is to achieve the most amount of benefit with the least amount of material, labor, and cost. We size the dome based on the efficient use of the pipe lengths with the least amount of waste. That is how we come to the size 22.6 feet in diameter and 14 feet tall. We get 10-foot lengths of pipe, and at a certain point the struts get too long and it's not very structurally sound, so we're at that maximum now with this. You also see the different shapes of domes with a 1V through 6V, and it's basically the number of triangles in each section with that. So you can see how it gets more round with more pieces. Each one of those pieces is cut pipe, and we use the 3V, and 4V is if you went much larger than the next size up from doing the size we're doing. You'd have to have a lot more pipe, a lot more complexity to it. Right now we only need to have 3 different lengths of pipe, and it's easy to fabricate and easy to construct for our purposes of the garden space. If you wanted to go much larger than this, then you'd have to go to a 4V, and it's more complicated to fabricate and also to build. Although it looks pretty nice too, but that's more structurally. You'd probably have to have a little bit different materials at the same time. An unexpected benefit of the geodesic dome with our fabrication materials is the fact that it can be disassembled quickly and reassembled in another spot. It can also be lifted and carried by a group of people across the property. It is lightweight and it is still strong. We use shade cloth of varying thicknesses and reflectivity depending upon the space that it's in. Right now we're using 40% shade cloth. You can see being pulled off of the dome here on a cloudy day. That's the nice thing I like about it, especially this is a very stretchy, great material when you buy it in bulk, and it adheres to the dome quite well, and then easily pulls off when it's a cloudy day or you want to get more sun, especially in cold seasons. And then if it's going to be cold at night, you can use it as more insulation at the same time. The 85% shade cloth can be used on the sides for reflection, especially in the winter, to have more reflected light on the inside going on the plants. And then also we've hung at the top of the dome an inverted umbrella, the one that's used like on a patio umbrella, to collect rainwater. That's worked very effectively in the rain, and then we have just a big garbage can underneath it to collect the water and use that for watering the plants. So it's fun to work with different strategies on the domes. And then you can also see the one panel example. That's the first panel that we cut with the hexagons and pentagons. And those are cut to size to overlap each other, and then using the green clips to hold them. And that's what really helps us have a adjustable size dome with the panels. They can come on and come off depending on the season, or you can just leave them on. In my case, I take off the sections on the bottom so we have good airflow, and then there's a vent at the top that opens up, which we'll see. Winter heat gain is very important. For this area, we had some really cold weeks, and you can see here where we had a low temperature of 32 and a high of temperature of 65 in the area, but also see the temperature of the dome goes up, so it kept it fairly warm at night. But there is no insulative quality within the plastic, so you need some of the kind of material to cover it up and pull it over, much like the shade cloth, to keep some of that heat in if it got really cold in the winter. But as far as our greens go, and then also they were covered up inside, so we have double plastic. They did quite well, and we had snow peas and arugula and mustard greens and a lot of herbs in there, mints, collards, things like that growing all winter long. And then we had peppers up until December and tomatoes. And I think we probably could have kept the peppers if we had double plastic those and have year-long growing, which we're going to try this next winter in there too. So the plastic is for thermal gain, heat gain in the winter. Now when it comes to fabricating the dome, we're using 1/2-inch EMT pipe. And we have a 14-inch diamond blade on a chop saw for cutting them to size. It's very important that they're cut to the correct size because when they go get pressed and punched, then they're all the correct length to make the shape of that. The tools that we use are vice grips, wrenches, and then an impact wrench to put it together. So it's pretty simple with that. And the vice grips we use to kind of hold pieces together when we're making adjustments. We loosely put it together, and then we use the impact wrench to really tighten those bolts down to hold it for being rigid. The hydraulic presses are used to punch the ends, and then also you can lift up on them all at the same time and bend them at the angles that is needed when they're going, because it is round. The slight curves happen at the joints where there's a bend in the pipe, and then that helps them lay flat on each other also. Or you can put them together and use the impact wrench, and it pulls them together quite tightly. So there's the cutting and then the punching, and those are the two things it would do for fabrication. Putting it together, again, is just lining up the different colored pipes in the right order. And that helps with the shape. It's very easy to see the pattern as we put it together, and then using the vice grips, as I said, to hold it as we're adding other pieces. As we're building the dome, sometimes we have to wait for the next section to come up, so we hold it together with the vice grip before we bolt it together. The covering of the dome is really the choice of the owner. 6mm plastic is what we use right now for a conventional greenhouse, and then we add the 40% shade cloth over the top of that. The plastic is left on for winter use and or for year-round growing. The pentagon and hexagon plastic panels could also be replaced with canvas or other materials, so you don't have to use the plastic. There's other things that you could use with that, depending upon what you have or would like to use, especially on the north side. If there's no straight sun coming in, you might want to use a white canvas or something else on the bottom sides especially. In the north, where there isn't direct sun, then those areas you might want to have some reflective material inside too to help really have more light gain inside for the plants, especially when the sun is at a low angle in the wintertime. There are lots of gardening strategies to use these materials and things that we will look at so we can customize your purpose and your use. You also see the shade cloth is held on by these green clips, which are easily available. That holds on the plastic also, and they're very tight. They hold it on very tight to the pipe, and you can use a hook to pull them off or your finger depending. And then that last right side picture, you can see the ground anchors. We have 3 ground anchors from the tractor store. They're 30 inches long going into the ground, and then a ratchet strap holding down the dome to the ground at 3 different points. That's where the stability comes, especially with wind when we have it covered with plastic or even the shade cloth to hold it stable to the ground. And they're very tight, and that rigidity then of the dome is then transferred to its ability to withstand wind. Depending on the situation, some gardening might be done on the ground or in pots or in raised beds. Raised beds allow for increased thermal mass and keeping it warm. We'll see some pictures of that. And also improved access to the gardener if you have raised beds in there too, so you don't have to stoop or bend over. Might be a combination of those things. When we're making our plastic panels, we use the struts to help size them up, and it's pretty standard. I have now a canvas pattern that I use that we lay on the ground, bring the plastic over a few layers, and then cut those panels. Very simple process in doing that. Also, there are available, you can get umbrella replacements for like patio umbrellas, but a lot of them aren't really quite the size that we use. You can get some large ones too, but they're kind of awkward to use, but kind of interesting. The only reason I use them really is to hang them inverted on the top when the plastic's not on to collect water. But they could also have like a canvas on one side, or if you want to have some privacy, you could have canvas panels as some of the hexagons and pentagons that are put around. And then you also see the plastic clips that are holding it on there. The more clips you have, the more stable it is on there, going around the edges of the different panels, especially with high winds. If you have that or if you have heavy rain, it just makes it more likely to stay on. Sometimes in heavy winds, the plastic will blow off, but it's easily put the clips to put them back on. I've only had that happen once, though, in a storm, and that's basically for the protection of the parts, too. If it gets to be too strong, you want things to be able to basically come apart a little bit so that you don't have any damage to the plastic, the clips, or the dome itself. But for the most part, it's very strong. And then the bottom center, you can see also that it's important that the plastic pieces are cut so that they overlap, and that protects the joints of the struts and also keeps water from coming in and gives you some material to wrap around the pipes when you clip them on. A lot of fun things you can do in the dome. We do add the metal doors. I like the metal storm doors. I got this one off of Facebook Marketplace, actually for a very good price. The metal is nice because you can use self-tapping screws and screw right into that. Otherwise, you can make a frame with the pipe and have another type of screen door, whatever you find. And basically that's what I'm doing, is I'm just looking. But I do like these metal storm doors when you can find those around, because they add more stability, and they're very strong and secure on the dome, which in itself is a very rigid structure. One of the fun experiments we have been doing this past year was inventing and using that inverted umbrella I was saying. And so with that and your irrigation, whatever you're going to do with your growing, can be customized within the dome for whatever strategy you want to use to make you successful. And the whole purpose of having our domes really is to grow vegetables all year. That is my goal here in Alabama, is to grow as many things as possible for as long as possible. We have such a great long growing season. And then when it's really hot in the summer, bringing that shade cloth over adds another buffer to the extreme temperatures. And with the vent, you can see the vent in the top here. It's kind of experimental at this time, but it's been working great. I'll clean it up in this next season. But we just cut a piece of plastic fitted to some triangle pieces, leftover pieces from the dome, and then we just have hinges there with straps, and then it just hangs down from the rope that goes off to the side. So it just flips down or hangs down when it's open and lets the air out the top for great ventilation. And then at night we just pull the rope, and then it closes off and seals it off quite nicely. So we're really trying to get season extension here. And then those cold weeks this year, or last year was, I think it was in December, January. I think the year before we got down to 11 degrees, 14 degrees this year. But you can see where we're using a thermometer in here. I like the Accurite sensors to keep track. And actually it was 17 degrees outside and 34 degrees within the dome. So that's great. And actually I was very surprised how cold it got even in the dome without the cover, the shade cloth, which adds a little bit more. But because we're also covering the plants inside the dome with additional plastic covers or shears, fabric, things like that, rime, they also have another layer of protection against the cold. So there's a lot of strategies we can use for season extension to protect our plants and keep ourselves going. So that's the purpose of our dome, really, is to have a protected area, season extension, grow lots of plants, have a trellis to grow the plants on, and all the features that the dome helps without, looking like an industrial situation. It actually looks like a piece of artwork and is very pleasant, especially when you get the plastic on. Looks very clean. And then if you have any other materials you want to use, you can get a little artsy with it at the same time. Thank you for your attention to this. I look forward to seeing you at the workshop. Keep in mind that standard and custom domes are available from myself and United Designers, Southwoods Ecosystems. I'm in Tuscaloosa, and we make them here, but also our system is portable. So if you'd like to have a workshop at your place, if you'd like to invent friends or have a permaculture blitz, something like that, we can also come to your shop, do the fabrication, excuse me, and the assembly within a weekend, and help other people see how they're built and encourage the use of these. It helps for season extension, more food for everyone, and that's really what we're trying to do with these. It's kind of my goal is to get as many people using these domes as possible within the area so that we can share information. We can all learn about how to use them better and share the plants, share the seeds, share the strategies, and grow a lot more food for ourselves and also to share with other people. So hopefully we'll see you on the 23rd or the 30th. Fabrication and tour of the existing dome is in Tuscaloosa, which is the pictures I've been showing. And then we'll go to Walden Farm and assemble that same dome that we fabricated the next weekend. Thanks, and I appreciate your time.